Hi, I'm Veronica Tash, and we're going to try a shorter video with a full script rather than an outline today, and look at the claim that profit is theft. This is an advocative video. That means I am advocating a position, not simply educating. Make sure you're thinking critically, questioning both what I'm telling you and your pre-existing thoughts. So there is a claim that all profit is theft. It certainly contradicts the values of capitalism, where we are taught that the profit motive is the drive that gets people to invest in creating the means of production, and that creates jobs. In such a society, profit is seen as something legitimate and even commendable. Much is done to legitimize it in the media, calling those who invest capital job creators and stressing that all interactions are voluntary, without putting much thought into exactly how true that is. Eventually, I will create a video on the issue of whether it is voluntary, but that is not the topic of this video. We are addressing here whether profit is theft. The model for capitalist enterprise we use today, leaving aside the world of self-employment, is that you have an employer hire employees who come to an agreement about what wage they will receive in exchange for an hour of their time. They are renting your labor by the hour. During those hours, you either provide a service for customers, create products which are then sold to customers, or perform some duty that ultimately allows for products or services to be sold to customers down the line. These customers only then pay if they think what they are being offered is worth more than the money they paid for it. And your wages are always intended to be less than the employer values your labor. There is some uncertainty, but there isn't any honest risk for any of the big companies, only the small startups, and then mainly for startups created by average people, not the children of rich people. If we look at the bailouts during the Great Recession of 2008 by both major parties, there were people at the top of the banking industry acting wildly irresponsibly, looking for a big payout, which they could keep if it worked out. But since it didn't, they got bailed out. We've done it for other big businesses as well, such as the big three auto producers not long afterward. So let's not try to justify the differential by risk. You are offered less than they value your labor at because they want a benefit out of the transaction. We can look at this using a simple formula. Profit equals sales minus cost. That is a basic economic formula you're probably already familiar with. Seriously. If you have never seen this before, maybe you're a bit too young to be watching. This is an elementary school level equation. You should have seen this by now. It's called the gross profit formula. And you can see it all over the place using a bit more nuance than that by describing what is included in sales, also known as revenue, and in costs. Just Google the formula or gross profit formula and you will see it. But what does this have to do with whether profit is theft or not? Theft may be included in costs, but it's not the same kind of theft. We have to play with it a bit to see the effect we're looking for. It has something to do with wages, what you're paid. Labor costs are part of what's included in costs, so why don't we break it out? Profits equals sales minus parentheses material costs plus wages, end parentheses. Now, wages is being used here to represent all compensation or labor costs. which may not necessarily be in the form of wages. It could include health insurance, 401k contributions made by the employer, your RSDHI taxes, and so on. But so long as we're cognizant of it, calling it wages is just simpler. We can also rearrange it a bit. Profit equals sales minus material costs minus wages. I wonder what wages are compared to everything else here. Profit plus wages equals sales minus material costs. And then we have wages equals sales minus material costs minus profit. Now, when I look at this, I'm also noticing something else. How do you figure out the value of your labor? Well, if we look at someone like Adam Smith or David Ricardo, or even Karl Marx, they would say the value of your labor is what your labor added to the value of what was already there. The value at the end would probably be best viewed as what it sold for on the market, and you would subtract from the cost of the things that you needed to make it. The cost you paid on the market. That includes things expended in the creation, such as fuel and depreciation on the tools or machines, as well as the raw or rawer materials used. And we would once again look at the market price of such things in the calculation. In the end, you could say that the value of the labor added is value of labor equals sales minus material costs. Wow, I think I see that in there. Let's simplify our other formula with that in mind. Wages equals sales minus material costs minus profit. It can also be written as wages equals value of labor minus profit. This is true for your individual labor, but chances are that you're going to have a hard time calculating the value of labor itself, because most economic activity involves several people doing different steps for the same employer. If I craft an iPhone, there are other employees working on designing that phone, and others yet working on packaging it, others working on marketing it, and because Apple has its own stores, others working on selling it. How much of the value is what I created, and how much should I consider the costs to be for someone else's labor? There are many tools that can be used to estimate it, such as assuming the proportions are in proportion to the wages paid already, or complicated metrics that focus on how much time is used at doing any particular task and how much time is spent learning how to do that particular task. It is not something that you can quickly do or even necessarily do yourself to figure out how much value you are adding to it. The relationship is true on the individual level, but is easy to calculate on the aggregate. If we look at all wages paid by an employer, we can see the total value of labor and profit very easily. All you need to know as an individual worker is that whatever your wages are, they are the difference between what value you created during your hours worked and the amount of profit the employer makes from your work, even if you don't know the exact numbers. Now, is profit then theft? It usually is put forth in the terms that is unpaid wages. I would certainly argue that if you do work of a certain value, you should receive compensation that is equivalent to that value. You deserve the full value of your labor, not a portion thereof, while you give a large portion to your employer. How much do you subsidize your employer? One easy calculation to do is look at the gap between productivity and wages. In the years leading to 1973, productivity and wages were highly correlated. The more profits that an employer received, the more employees received, fairly proportionally. While employers were still profiting and taking labor value from their employees, the distribution between profits and wages maintained a balance. This changed in 1973. Wages became unpaired with productivity, and many will point to 1978 as when it was truly noticeable, as you can see in this graph. How much has this changed? Well, we sit exactly 50 years from 1973, so let's look at the metrics from January or the first quarter, depending on how data was kept and how this has changed. For our numbers, let's ask FRED, which is an acronym for Federal Reserve Economic Data, available online from the Federal Reserve. This is a major source for economists when they aren't, assuming things. Our first stop is the graph non-farm business sector, labor productivity, output per hour for all workers. Not very excitingly described at all, but it gets you to what you need. Productivity is pre-adjusted for inflation and measures how productive workers are at different times, pretty much up to how much more efficient technology makes us over time. In the first quarter of 1973, we get a number of 48.781. The first quarter of 2023, we get the number 112.975. That means that we are 2.3160 times as productive in 2023 as we were 50 years ago. Significant figures there. It has more than doubled. If we continue the same parity, we would be making 2.1360 times as much as we did back then. But do we? Well, for that we need data that goes back to at least the first quarter of 1973. There is a great median wage for 16 and over that I saw, but that only goes back to 1979. It actually would make my point better because it didn't just flatten out immediately, and there were some worker gains through the 1970s, but I'm just really drawn to the round 50 number. So we will leave that behind and look at a series of data sets that start with average hourly earnings of production and non-supervisory employees from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Our first one has, total private. This is the overall wages from 1 month to the next, and it goes back before 1973. In January 1973, the average hourly wage was $4.03, which the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator says is equivalent to $28.30 today. In January of 2023, that would be $28.29. We lost a penny of compensation in the past 50 years. There are several others that focus on specific industries. So if we look at goods producing employees, they went from $4.22 or $30.41 in 2023 dollars. They now make $28.91 an hour on average. If we look at private service providing employees, they made $3.91, which is $28.18 in today's dollars. And they now get $28.16 in 2023. How about retail trade or retail workers? They were paid $3.59 in 1973 which is $25.21 in today's dollars, but only get $20.22 today. How about transportation and warehouse workers? Your truck drivers and warehouse workers mostly. They went from making $5.63 an hour in 1973, which is $40.58 in today's dollars, but now only make $26.72. Finally, let's look at private education and health services workers, which is an odd thing to put together. They don't seem very related. They went from making $3.44 an hour, which is $24.79 in 2023 dollars. And they averaged to $29.74 in actual 2023. We found some workers that actually got a raise in the past half century. Now, if we're getting parity, rather than the average wage being $28.29 an hour, it would be $65.52 an hour. Corporations would still be profitable and gain more in return in terms of actual things than they did in 1973. But we would be paid a hell of a lot more. We're talking $136,000 a year if we were still working 40 hours. We lost the last half a century of human development, not sharing in the collective fruits. Only the super rich got that. John Locke observed, in passing, many centuries ago, that a base laborer will always work for a subsistence wage. He didn't think it right or wrong, just a matter of fact. You need to at least make enough to survive a mean existence, but you have nothing to command a higher price. The more skilled a worker becomes, the higher the wage they command, but it is the least you will accept so that you feel you're getting something to keep you from just taking a job, doing something menial and unskilled or less skilled. There's a lot to say about John Locke, but a full view of his philosophy means an educational video, which means people will have to actually watch it. The one I've done so far, very few views and not much watch time per viewer. We'll get back to him once I can build an audience. Am I trying to manipulate you here? Yes. Watch the educational content so you can have a neutral base for us to start from. I don't want to be doing petty partisan clickbait videos. I want coherent thoughts out of my audience. I'm not going to go any simpler than I am right now. This is my limit for easy to digest content. Jump on so we can talk about deeper issues. But this is what we are seeing. That 1973 base living is what they figure we will work for. And actually, I could do another video on how certain goods inflate at different rates, benefiting those with money. We do lose a bit over time. That what we are paid is not based on what our hours are worth, but rather upon what we will collectively accept. Is that theft? I believe it is. As advantageous economic position allows for those who already have to coerce us to make them money under an effective threat of death. Do you just not want to work? Well, then you're homeless, wandering around and begging people, fellow workers, not the rich, to keep you alive. No one is forcing you to accept that pay. Reality forces you to accept that pay because there is no commons. You cannot just go pick fruit off trees or go find your own land upon which to establish yourself anymore. You are at the mercy of those who already own it all. What should you be asking yourself right now? You should be asking if an employer really adds nothing to the process. Don't companies get started by entrepreneurs that have a brilliant idea that makes everything work? Don't they invent the product? Am I just telling you one side of the story? Do employers deserve nothing at all for what they provide? These are valid questions, and the issue ought to be addressed. Part of the problem here is that we have two different things that we call profit, because we define profit from an actuarial standpoint rather from a nature of the income standpoint. If someone builds birdhouses in their spare time and sells them at crafts shows, the excess income they get from their hobby is called profit, despite being much more like wages. They have material costs, but their labor adds to the value of the product, and all that is considered profit is the added value of the labor they perform themselves. They aren't employing others and gathering income from what those other peoples are doing. They aren't employing others and gathering income from what those other people are doing. This is not profit as we are defining it here by focusing on employee relations. In addition, it is far from impossible that an individual owner adds value to the process. They could have a genius product idea, and many smaller owners may labor alongside their employees. Even management, if done properly, can be said to be offering a service to the process. In such a case, it can be said that these owners should be paying themselves a wage commensurate with the value they are adding to the process. Of course, they don't, because taxes are cheaper if they don't, and it would be extra effort to calculate. But many owners are passive owners who simply collect funds. Some add to the profit by managing in such a way that it forces wages down through layoffs or forcing lower compensation on workers. But that isn't adding value to the economic enterprise, just cutting themselves a larger slice of the pie. Then we have people like Elon Musk, the brilliant entrepreneur whose bumbling incompetence is absolutely destroying the value of the enterprise itself, as he wantonly laid off workers, overworked them, scared off his customers, advertisers, and much of his product, you, the Twitter users. He then took the only actual value of the company, the brand, and ditched it all to call it X. It is absolutely the worst handling of a company that I've heard of. He is slashing a $44 billion company to being worth $8 billion and falling in a year's time. He makes Unity seem based. Rather than buying Twitter, he could have just created X as a new company, since he didn't really want the brand or the site. He just wanted its users. Though, Elon, if you're watching this, ignore what I just said. I was just hating on you because I'm jealous. Rebranding to X is the greatest idea ever, and it will pull you out of this nosedive. Perhaps merge the company with Tesla and SpaceX and rebrand it all as simply X. Make Tesla stream right-wing content without the owner's consent. It's a winning strategy. Do it. Elon, do it. Ignore me. Do it. So not all profit is really profit, and thus not all is theft. However, we also overestimate how much value owners actually contribute. While there are iconic examples of inventors creating a brand new, revolutionary product, that isn't the norm. Where do new products come from? Well, employers hire workers to do research and development for them. Workers are generally the people coming up with new car designs and iPhones and new designer drugs. But we are left, ultimately, with a question that relies upon values rather than facts. Are profits theft or something else? Perhaps a futile tax upon workers. My values center around fairness and equality of opportunity, and so I consider profit to be theft. However, as this is a values question, you might not find it to be theft. What we can say factually is that profits are value of workers' labor, which is not paid to them. Where do your values lead you on this question? Was this video enlightening to you in any way? Let me know in the comments below. I also want to correct something I had stated previously. I had said that I would try to limit ads if I am monetized to 1 per hour of content. Well, from what I've seen discussed about how YouTube works since then, I don't have the power to do that. In fact, they may be putting ads in the videos as is and just not sharing any of it with me. So I don't have the control which I thought I did, but thanks for watching.